this could mean the end of the Canadian auto industry.
Will the auto industry survive? Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, we're talking the auto industry. The government is now trying to sue Stellantis for leaving Canada, when in reality, it's the government's fault for Stellantis leaving Canada. We got a couple other stories here we'll start off with. Let's jump into this. First off, we got this one here. This is a lady who sleeps at Tim Hortons. She works at Tim Hortons and she sleeps in Tim Hortons.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Why are you back here with a sleeping bag? You live inside the store?
I stay sometimes, yes. I finish closing and I'm too tired to go anywhere. My room was taken. I cannot
You know
pay
you
now.
can't be sleeping.
8 months she's been sleeping in Tim Hortons. This is Canada now, where Canadian kids don't get jobs and we have people from India sleeping in these restaurants. Bad for Canada, bad for her. Canadians do better and demand better for others. Yeah, this was a lie that was sold to the people of India. They were allowed to be brought in when we didn't have room for them. We don't have healthcare. We don't have housing for them. It's bad for them. It's also bad for Canadians because everyone coming in is not getting vetted. Not only people trying to make a better life for themselves like her, but goblins, goons, and gangsters, which is why we have so much crime in our country. Moving ahead here, look at this ridiculous story coming out of the UK. UK Health Agency cites benefits of first cousin marriage in bizarre report. Unsurprisingly, sparks outrage. This is a real story. A major health authority has pulled its recent report citing the benefits of first cousin marriage in the UK. The UK's National Health Service came under fire after publishing guidance that experts claim promoted inter-family unions despite well-documented concerns and increased risks of birth defects. This is disgusting. Research cited in the article titled, "Should the UK Government ban first cousin marriage?" described various potential benefits of marrying a first cousin, including strong extended family support systems and economic advantages. I don't even know what to say anymore. This is such a clown show. This is a gong show. Is this where Canada's headed? Moving ahead here, so we got the auto industry on the brink of collapse. Stellantis has decided to pull their investment, move it down to America, $18 billion, and now we're seeing the Liberal government trying to sue them over the money that was used to carry the company through their retooling process. So the government forked up hundreds of millions of dollars to keep paying workers while they retooled, and now they're saying they're not going to retool. Now they're threatening to sue them. There's a whole bunch of problems with this story, but the main conclusion from this is it's the Liberals' fault. Mark Carney could have already got a deal. He doesn't want to get a deal. He talks about getting the best deal for Canada. What deal is that after every single major industry that's not a part of CUSMA here collapses?
Not only am I disappointed, it's completely unacceptable. So we will fight for these jobs.
Mark Carney's broken promises and weakness abroad are costing Canadian workers at home.
What my message to the Prime Minister when I meet him on Thursday is if he can't get a deal, let's start hitting him back.
I think we do have a few cards, and it's important that we play those cards well. 40% of our sales are American-built vehicles here in Canada.
We should keep the company to account, and they make lots of cars in lots of places around the world. Find one, put it in Brampton.
If we're not going to fight for the auto sector and the 150,000 direct jobs in that sector, what are we willing to fight for?
As auto giant Stellantis announces it's moving production of the Jeep Compass to the U.S. and investing billions south of the border in the process. CTV News has obtained a letter Industry Minister Melanie Joly has sent to the company saying the federal government is considering legal action against the automaker due to funding commitments the feds in Ontario made to the company. In a statement to CTV News, Stellantis says Canada is, quote, very important to the company, and there will be plans to share about Brampton soon following discussions with the government. Do you have any clarity at this hour on whether those jobs are gone?
We don't have clarity, and it's a punch in the gut, this news. 3,000 workers, highly trained, highly skilled, who have devoted their life to this assembly plant. We're expecting to go back to work in short order. And this pause was set up for the retooling, which was subsidized by the government of Canada and the province of Ontario. And so the Jeep Compass was meant to go into production, and now that it's going to Illinois, the families are devastated. It's ugly news for our community. There are numerous associated jobs that are going to be affected by it.
Is anyone providing you with assurances that there's a possibility, for example, those jobs will stay?
No. Stellantis said yesterday that if there's a trade agreement, if tariffs are lifted, that there's a business case for production in Canada. But they said with these tariffs, there's simply not a business case.
So you heard it straight from Patrick Brown here, the mayor of Brampton, that if the tariffs were removed, if Mark Carney got a deal, this would not be a problem. All he has to do is sign a deal with Trump. Trump will sign a deal if it's good enough. Carney doing this sectoral thing where he's trying to get steel and aluminum one at a time, it won't work. It has to be a big package deal. Carney's not negotiating properly. He's already given up a handful of things with nothing in return. This is just so sick to watch because from my perspective, all of you watching, we know that he's 91% invested in America, so he doesn't care. In fact, you might even say he probably doesn't want to get a deal because this will be better for America. He wants that $18 billion to go down there. It helps the entire industry as a whole. The first question you might be asking is Mark Carney invested in Stellantis? No, he's not. I've recently separated out the autos and auto parts from the rest of these here out of his investments. We've got these car companies he is invested in: Ferrari, Ford Motor Company, Harley Davidson, Tesla, and Rivian. And underneath it here, I have car parts companies that he's invested in. Regardless, this just strengthens the entire sector. It boosts America in general. With the guy being 91% invested in America, this only helps his stocks in America if America is doing well as a whole. Not to mention a huge industry like the auto industry.
But they said with these tariffs, there's simply not a business case. And so they were not hopeful. They said down the road, we can look at production, but there's too many ifs in that equation to give any comfort to myself or the workers that have lost their jobs, and we're angry.
This is not going anywhere. The Stellantis keeping this door open, one foot in. Yeah, maybe we'll come back. Don't worry. Yeah, only if the tariffs get removed. Mark Carney's not negotiating a deal. Now we've got Ian Lee of Carleton University here. This guy, to me, doesn't seem like a paid-off CBC shill. He's an actual university professor just giving his opinion, and he's saying that the auto industry is going to be done in Canada.
You feel this could mark the beginning of the end for Canada's auto manufacturing industry. Why?
I do, and I don't have any dog in this hunt. Don't consult with any of these parties whatsoever. I was profoundly influenced by the late brilliant visionary Sergio Marchionne, the late Windsor native, Windsor, Ontario, and the CEO of Fiat Chrysler. And he talked incessantly in the years before he very sadly passed away from cancer. He talked about the changing auto industry in the world. He said, look, it's always been capital intensive, but it is becoming much more capital intensive. The amounts are becoming gargantuan. The R&D is going through the roof because of the need for autonomous vehicles and EVs. He actually went so far as to say the world auto market cannot support 10 giant auto companies. The market isn't big enough. They got to consolidate. So taking from that point, and you look at this, Canada can only survive if we have access to a very large market. And there's only 3 very large markets for autos. One's called China, one's Europe, and one's the US. And all 3, by the way, protect their manufacturing sector, including most recently the US. And so unless Mr. Trump reverses his decision, I think that those tariffs are here to stay. If they're here to stay, those cars are not economic, and those car companies will close those plants in the months and few years ahead and close them down.
And with that said, that means Canada needs to pivot and pivot quickly. This has happened in other countries before, like Australia. Mitsubishi, Ford, Toyota all left, all between 2008 to 2017. And essentially, Australia doesn't have an auto industry anymore. Instead, they pivoted to lithium, iron ore, and LNG, and they're better for it. Now, I'm not saying that's what Canada should do, but maybe we should have another plan where the government steps in and says, you know what, it's time to really push hard on LNG or something else and start creating those jobs while we're weathering this storm. We have a backup plan. And we look at the example of New Zealand. They used to have an auto industry, Nissan, Ford, Honda, back in the 80s and 90s, but the new government came in, removed all the tariffs on vehicles, and guess what? All these auto companies just disappeared. Not needing to pay the tariff, they stopped producing cars in New Zealand. Well, since they've moved to tourism and agriculture and other things, but it isn't the be-all end-all, but we need to pivot. We need to pivot quickly. Unfortunately, we've got a stupid government that only wants to enrich themselves. Now, what we've got here is conservative Kyle Cpac, who's the labor critic. This is a good look. Pierre Poilievre has opened the doors to the conservatives going out not only on CBC, he goes on CTV as well. And he holds his ground here really well. David Cochrane tries to drill down and protect Mark Carney's position, and Kyle dishes it straight here.
We've heard from Industry Minister Mélanie Joly. She's called this decision by Stellantis completely unacceptable, and the government will fight for these jobs. What do you make of this latest hit to the auto sector?
Well, look, I think her statement and $1.50 gets you a coffee at Tim importance. They seem to have outrage for all kinds of things that are happening, but, very little action. This is just absolutely devastating news for the people in Brampton and the workers at that plant. These could be absolutely permanent job losses. 3,000 Canadians who now have to wonder how they're going to pay for things in a terrible cost of living crisis that we're all going through. And President Trump is getting what he wants, a massive investment and a transfer of assembly auto jobs from Canada into the United States. If we remember back in March, Mark Carney said we will build a stronger auto industry. And look at where we are in October. It's the exact opposite that's happened.
Unfortunately, Mark Carney's getting exactly what he wants, too. He wants his stock value to stay nice and high and go up. This is just so insane. Carney needs to be forced to sell all of his stocks immediately.
The industry minister has done. She has sent a letter to the chief executive officer of Stellantis in which Mélanie Joly threatens legal action, saying that Stellantis has made legally binding obligations to Canada and they will hold the company to full account and exercise all options, including legal, and then calling for them to extend supports for the workers who have been essentially furloughed because of the remodeling plan for the plant that was on the books until today. What do you make of the threat of legal action? Is that a strong enough message to send to the company?
Well, look, I guess when you have nothing left to offer, you threaten a company with legal action instead of creating the environment where the company wants to make the investments in Canada. The failure that has happened here is the failure of this government, and it's a failure of the negotiation to remove the tariffs. What's amazing to me is Mark Carney said that this would all be resolved by July 21st. Of course, he's missed that deadline. In fact, tariffs have gotten worse. But even more shocking to me was the Prime Minister got up in question period last week and bragged about the fact that there's only a 10% tariff on Canadian autos, saying that's the best in the world. I've talked to Unifor auto workers, and they have told me that the 10% tariff is a tragedy for them. Like, this could mean the end of the Canadian auto industry if the tariff stays at 10%. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is saying 10% is a great deal. So he's either terribly informed or he has been informed and is just trying to put on some kind of a charade like he's doing something.
Well,
Or the third option, he's 91% invested in America and everything is going to plan. Kyle's representing here. As he said, when all you've got left is to sue, that's what the Liberals are doing here. Should the Liberals be suing here? Yeah, I guess. Because an agreement was made, they're leaving. Yeah, sure, they have to pay that money back. But same does Christian Firth, GC Strategies. What happened to that money? Are they suing for that money, or is that one just being swept under the rug? It's not a cottage, it's a chalet. How about the Green Slush Fund? Hundreds of millions of dollars in net for Shern. Is that money coming back? Or is that just getting stuffed into well-connected insiders' pockets and never being seen again? How about Coco White Bam Bam, Randy Boussinot, Stephen Anderson, all of that money? Fake Indigenous Randy Boussinot enriches his own company. How about Stephen Guilbeault, Cycle Capital? I could go on and on and on. Let's start suing. Let's sue all of these people and get all of our money back. But it comes down to it, as he said, we need to create the business environment that companies want to come here and set up shop. Instead, Donald Trump is spooking them down south, and it's working, and Carney's helping them do it.
I guess both can be true, that 10% might be better than other places, but because of the integration and the vulnerability and the profit margins of the Canadian auto industry, it's still fatal, right? And it's way worse than where it was at the beginning of the year. So it's one of those, it is cold comfort to everybody who has lost their jobs and fears losing their jobs. And I just wonder, what does a win look like for auto workers at this point in time? Because I'm sure you've seen the comments from Howard Lutnick, where he said auto assembly is going to be done in the U.S. Canada needs to figure out what it's going to do instead. It looks harder and harder to see what a win is here for Canada in this particular sector.
Well, that's their goal, right? That's what they've made very clear. They want all auto assembly. The challenge for us is two things. Number one, we're going into these negotiations in a really weakened bargaining position because of 10 years of poorly managing the Canadian economy. We can't build things in Canada. Bill C-69 stops us from building pipelines, building mines. Imagine if we had built up American reliance on rare earth metals, critical minerals, and we actually had alternative places to send our oil and gas. We'd be in a much stronger bargaining position to deal with these kinds of things. But on this particular issue, we put forward a platform for auto saying Canadian manufactured automobiles would be HST free.
Right.
And that would massively increase the demand for Canadian made automobiles that could offset all kinds of losses that we're experiencing. But they're not doing that. They're sending letters threatening to sue the company that's transferring jobs out of the country.
Look, I appreciate
I mean, on top of that, too, right now, America's getting in a tiff with China over canola. Canada could step in and said, hey, we'll sell you canola and even make it a good deal for America to relieve the tariffs. That way it gives Donald Trump more leverage against China. Make the whole thing one big package, not sectoral stuff, one big package. There's a path to victory here, but we need a prime minister who's in it for Canada.
The argument that had the resource development policies been different, you could have a stronger overall economy with a higher gross domestic product. I mean that has been a consistent position of the Conservatives. But to bring it down to the Windsor plants, and the Brampton plant, a new oil pipeline does not save the auto worker's job if Donald Trump has decided he's going to destroy the auto industry in Canada and force it to move to the United States, right? I mean, it maybe gives the government...
Well, what kind of dumb comment is this? If we have an extra $30 or $40 billion a year of revenue coming in, it gives us way more options. What is this? This is so dumb, Cochrane.
If you're at a stronger economy, right? If the United States had a reliance on the critical minerals that we should have been producing, but it takes 12 to 15 years to build a mine, if they were reliant upon the rare earth metals that we can produce here, if we had alternative places that we can send our oil and gas, these are all things that you can use when you're bargaining with someone to say, well, wait a minute, actually, we're not going to let you take all of these auto jobs because we can actually find markets for all these other things that you've grown reliant on that comes from Canada. So the weakening of the Canadian economy from all of these things is 100% relevant to the position we're in now. And even what they're trying to do, saying we're going to deal with the bureaucracy and how long it takes to get projects approved by creating a new bureaucracy that may approve certain projects, that's not the answer. We have to get rid of these impediments to massively build the Canadian economy so that we can actually have those kinds of bargaining tools and leverages when we're dealing with the United States.
Right, but look...
Yeah, but Carney doesn't care. Unless it's going to enrich his Stripe shares, he's not going to do it. He's spot on here. We should have had all this in place. We would have way more leverage. Now what can we do? Increase the price of electricity going to America and try to squeeze America that way? Add some sort of tariff or increased tax on energy coming out of Ontario? Cut off the electricity, cut off the oil? We don't have options here.
There is no time machine to go back and change the decisions, right? So that is a hypothetical leverage play that could happen had other things been done. That's not where we are.
Yeah, let's just sweep this all under the rug. That's right. Good job, Cochrane.
Country right now. That's not where the economy is. So in the absence of those solutions, I mean, what is the step?
No, we can still do this right now. Carney could right now lift the tanker ban, lift the oil and gas cap, fix things immediately. He's had time here. He's had months. He's had more than half a year here. He's done nothing.
Here, because capital is going to go where it's easier to get a return and where it's just more certain. And right now, that is inside the lower 48 states of the United States and the continental U.S. for manufacturing, because they've decided to use their economy that is 10 times the size of ours as a massive leverage play against a once reliable partner.
Sure. And part of that is we have an industrial carbon tax that makes things like steel and other things that we produce more expensive that they won't get rid of. Another part of that are zero emission vehicle mandates. The big three auto producers have said we've decoupled regulation in auto on zero emissions from the United States, and they've made decisions.
Yeah, and that took forever to get rid of. It had to push the auto industry to the edge before finally Carney rescinded that, put a pause on it. What a disaster.
In auto that are now coming back to haunt them. All of these things need to be canceled and reversed.
Yeah, so I mean, Kyle's knocking this out of the park here. Good show, pushing back on David Cochrane, CBC. They go back and forth a few more times here, talking basically the same thing. Carney's getting it from all sides. Here we get it from the president of Unifor.
It doesn't stop at auto. They will keep coming until they have weakened us as a nation and as an economy. And that is something we can't stand for. So the moment is now. The line in the sand is Brampton, and we have to push back as a country.
A spokesperson from Stellantis says the company will be adding a third shift to its other assembly plant in Windsor. The statement says, Canada is very important to us. We have plans for Brampton and will share them upon further discussions with the Canadian government. Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly isn't satisfied with that olive branch. What does this tell you about how effective Canada is in stopping Trump from getting what he wants?
This is a very specific example where we had a plant that was transitioning product, and they had an empty plant in the U.S. So it kind of an easy, cowardly decision by the company to say, let's appease the White House, for 9 months of anxiety and ignore the 62 years of partnership in that community in Brampton, Peel Region, and Ontario. Let's abandon 3,000 workers with a robocall. These are the things that we've been warning the federal government about and the provincial government about since this trade war started. Brampton is vulnerable, and there's other plants in Ontario that are either in transition or on pause.
They warned the federal government, yet Carney did nothing. He can't make a deal. Why can't he make a deal? What are they negotiating? What are the terms? Supply management is off the table. Is that the hinge piece that is not allowing a deal to go through?
But it is the loss of a shift at Brampton. It is not the loss of all of Brampton, right? At least in the plans that we have available now?
No. The company has said, well, we have other plans and we're going to let the government know. No. We have no vehicle in that plant. Okay. That plant, for all intents and purposes, dead unless someone says we have a car. If someone says we have a parts distribution depot or whatever, that's like an Amazon investment.
So the company keeps floating this idea, putting their foot in the door. Maybe we'll bring a car back. That's not what's happening here. The third shift is just increasing production in Windsor, which was already set aside for that city. So what are you going to have? A bunch of people flood down from Brampton down to Windsor now and just take up all those jobs?
The company said there's 1,500 jobs available down in Windsor. I mean, 2 weeks ago, they said that they were going to add a third shift in Windsor. That's because they negotiated that with the union. Those are supposed to be for people in Windsor. It's supposed to be good news.
Small countries that have what appear to be a thriving auto sector, and Sweden comes to mind. So if Sweden can have Volvo, why can't Canada have an auto manufacturer?
That's a very good point. And Sweden sells, they have a great big market. It's called the European Union. And they sell, I've been to Europe many times, and they sell, Volvo is huge in Europe. If you go on the Autobahn, for example, you can see Volvo trucks and Volvo cars everywhere. But again, the critical point in any industry, especially manufacturing, where the construction costs, one plant is $5 billion, just one auto plant. And you need multiple plants to be a company. And so the amounts are so large, you need very large production runs to achieve the economies of scale to break even. So Volvo is accessing the European market with over 500 million people. So they are doing what one must do to survive in that industry. We've only survived for the last 7 years since Cpac, when our industry was going down the tubes at the time, was doing very badly. We only survived because we did gain access to a huge market called the United States. And we had it from then until roughly 2 days ago when the president said, sorry, we're going to make those cars going forward.
But we do manufacture some cars that are, Japanese automakers, U.S. automakers, but the cars are built here. What about promoting those cars in Canada and maybe even giving them a little bit of a tariff edge so that somebody chooses, actually Edge is interesting because the Ford Edge used to be built in Oakville, but something that encourages Canadians to buy some of those cars that are primarily built in Canada?
I'm not suggesting there's no market for automobiles. It's a little over 1 million. I think it's 1.2 million cars are actually purchased. But when you look at that, Toyota produces 10 million cars a year. Volkswagen is number 2 at, I think, 9.2, 9.5 million. These are gigantic numbers, and we are a small market. Toyota and Honda are interesting because they're not American companies. They are already in the U.S. market. They're in the Canadian market. They probably can continue to produce for the Canadian market. But I think we're going to see the GMs and the Fords and the Stellantis gradually withdraw because they understand their market is the U.S. It's vastly larger, and the tariffs are going to make it uneconomic to export those cars made in Canada to the U.S. And we export most of our cars that we actually manufacture in Canada. They will become uneconomic with the tariffs. That's the whole point of the tariffs, is to make those cars uneconomic in our country. It's the arithmetic that's driving this. I mean, people think it's Donald Trump. Yes, he made the decision, but it's the arithmetic of the tariffs that make the cars uneconomic on the U.S. side, and we export most of the cars made in Canada.
And for that reason, New Zealand had tariffs back in the 80s and 90s. Government comes in, removes the tariffs, and the auto industry there decides, you know what, we can leave. We don't need to make them here anymore. It's essentially the reverse.
Yeah, okay, one last question, and this is why we have you on the program. As you say, you have no economic interest or political connections to any of the parties here, and the answer to
I gotta say, that's refreshing and a rarity on CBC.
Do you think that maybe Canada should redirect the money that it puts into the auto industry. I know there are a lot of canola farmers and softwood lumber producers, who have a great interest in your answer to this, that we should subsidize the auto industry less and put that money in other places.
I've actually come to that conclusion. I read a whole series of studies that were done before Australia exited auto manufacturing in 2017 and the post-mortems. They were done by consulting companies, by government agencies, by academics, and they were really good. They were very objective, empirical, impartial. And, the doom and gloom that people predicted that Australia was going to, collapse or decline precipitously because they exited auto manufacturing did not happen. In fact, their GDP, average income per person, which was below Canada at the time, has gone above Canada now because they pivoted to resources, just as you suggested. Now they pivoted to mining and they pivoted to all the other resources they have. And in our country...
Yeah, so that's iron ore, lithium, that kind of thing.
I argued, and I've been talking to my students about this, we don't have a comparative advantage in manufacturing. We like to think we do. I know Premier Ford says we do, but we don't have the production runs and the scale of population that Europe, China, US has. But we do have a comparative advantage in resources, in agriculture, in potash, in nuclear, in oil, and gas, in critical minerals. We're sitting on literally trillions of dollars in yet unexploited natural resources in this country that could fuel an incredible investment boom, because there are investors around the world waiting to come in and develop those resources.
This is so refreshing. This guy just calls it straight, what we should be doing. Critical minerals, oil, gas, potash, agriculture, LNG, all of it. We should play to our strengths here. What is Carney going to do? Is he going to try bailing out the auto industry over and over? Is he going to let it die? Is this part of his plan to push through the whole EV mandate? Is he going to say, oh, the auto industry's dead, we can go back to putting that EV mandate on, you guys have to buy EVs now? What's he going to do? And that whole EV mandate is ridiculous too, because they're not allowing Chinese EVs in, yet they want to force us to buy EVs. Like, make it make sense.